The alien city of Zell, though, was alive with sound and light as the grand arena, filled with every kind of being from every corner of the galaxy. Rows of towering crystal arches glowed in deep blue, while banners of alien houses swayed in the wind above the stands. The people had come for one reason, and one reason only: to see the speed duels, and to see their champion Vral prove once again that no one in the galaxy could move faster than him. Vral stepped into the arena floor with his head high, and his 4 long arms raised to greet the roaring crowd. His armor gleamed like liquid silver under the bright light, and his black eyes scanned the sea of faces with the confidence of a king. The duel announcer's voice rolled across the arena, telling the crowd that today would be another day of glory for the Zell Theory champion. Vral smiled a sharp smile and spoke loud enough for every being in the stands to hear. "No creature alive moves faster than me," he said, and the crowd shouted in joy. His voice carried the weight of endless victories, and no one dared to doubt him. He had beaten warriors from the Swiftclari tribes, who could strike before a blaster shot crossed the room. He had outrun the reflex-driven hunters of the Vanner Moons, whose every muscle was built for sudden attack. He had even defeated the rare speed drones from the Forge worlds. In every duel his opponents had fallen before they could even begin to react. The arena's betting screens lit up, showing heavy odds for Vral and almost no chance for the challenger. Then the gate on the far side of the arena slid open, and a single human stepped into the light. He wore no armor, only simple black combat clothing and a calm look in his eyes. His name was Captain Rafe Hallow. The crowd laughed and hissed at the sight of him. Humans were slow in the eyes of most aliens. They were clever and stubborn, perhaps, but never quick. This duel would be over in seconds, and everyone knew it. Vral looked at the human and tilted his head in a show of mock respect. "So the human wants to test his luck," he said to the crowd. "Perhaps I will give him one free chance to strike me before I end this match." The crowd roared with laughter, and the betting numbers climbed even higher in Vral's favor. Rafe stood still in the center of the arena, his hands at his sides, and his gaze fixed on Vral. There was no fear in his stance, and no sign of nervous movement. Only a steady stillness that made a few in the crowd pause. The announcer called for the duel to begin, and the arena's massive gong was raised by mechanical arms above the 2 fighters. Vral began to move even before the sound rang out. His body blurred into motion, his legs pounding the ground with impossible speed. To most in the arena, it was already over before it began. They expected to see the human fall in a flash of light and motion. But in that single instant, something happened that made the entire crowd forget to breathe. Rafe moved. It was not a large movement nor a wild strike. It was a clean, sharp step to the side, with one hand rising like a blade through air. It happened so quickly that even the arena's high-speed cameras struggled to catch the exact moment. Vral's eyes widened slightly as his first strike met nothing but empty space. He landed in a crouch and whipped his head toward the human, expecting to see him stumbling or out of place. Instead, Rafe stood exactly where he had chosen to be, his calm gaze still locked on Vral. For the first time in many cycles, the champion felt a sliver of surprise slide into his mind. The crowd was not sure if they had truly seen what happened. Some whispered that the human had moved first before the champion even began his charge. Others laughed and said it was impossible. The announcer's voice hesitated before speaking again, as if unsure of the truth. Vral's smile returned, though it was not quite as wide as before. He straightened and spread his arms to the crowd, claiming that he was only warming up. The human would not escape the next strike. He told himself that whatever had just happened was a fluke. No one, no matter the species, could react faster than a Zell Theory master. The gong was lifted again. Vral bent low, preparing for a second charge, one that would leave no doubt about his superiority. In his mind, he pictured the moment of victory, the human lying on the ground, the crowd screaming his name as always. But Rafe's eyes never left him. There was no sign of fear, no hint of panic. Only the faintest shift in his weight, as if he were already ready for the moment to come. The gong began to fall, the crowd leaning forward in their seats to witness the inevitable. Vral's muscles coiled like steel cables, his heart pounding with the thrill of the hunt. This time he would not hold back. This time the human would see what true speed looked like. And as the deep metallic sound of the gong rolled across the arena floor, Vral exploded forward, once more in a blur of silver and shadow. Yet even in that instant as the champion's form closed the distance, there was a flicker of movement from the human, a flicker that promised this duel would not end as anyone expected. The echo of the gong still rolled through the air when the alien champion's form became a streak of silver against the deep blue of the arena floor. Vral's forearms shifted into a blur of motion, each strike aimed with perfect precision, each attack carrying the confidence of someone who had never known defeat. The crowd leaned forward, their eyes wide with the thrill of watching their champion end another match before it could truly begin. Yet something was wrong. Vral felt it in the smallest fraction of a moment as his first strike passed through empty space. The human was not there. He had been there a heartbeat ago, calm and still like a shadow unmoved by the light, but now he was simply gone from where Vral had aimed. The champion's second strike whipped around with impossible speed, aiming at where his instincts told him the human would be, yet even this missed by a finger's width. The crowd blinked, trying to process what they had seen. Some shouted in disbelief, others swore the human had stepped aside before the gong had even finished sounding. Vral's sharp black eyes darted to his opponent and found him standing a short distance away, his hand extended in a relaxed open gesture as if inviting another attack. There was no panting, no sign of strain, no hesitation in his stance. It was as if moving away from the alien's lightning strikes required no more effort than breathing. The champion narrowed his eyes, his pride stirring into something sharper, something colder. He had fought hundreds of duels across worlds, and never once had his speed failed him. Now before the eyes of his people, a human, a slow, warm-blooded, ground-dwelling creature, was making him look like an amateur. That was not possible, not in the order of things, not in the laws of nature as he knew them. He lunged again, aiming low, then high, his movements flowing like a river of blades. Rafe did not even step back. He tilted his head just enough to let the alien's arm sweep past his face. Then he shifted his weight, letting the second strike brush the empty air where his ribs had been a moment before. And then, with almost lazy grace, he reached out and tapped Vral's armored shoulder with 2 fingers. The sound of that tap was almost lost in the noise of the crowd, yet for those close enough to see, it was like a spark hitting dry tinder. Gasps rose from the front rows. The meaning of that touch was clear. The human had not only dodged every attack, but had landed a hit on the champion. A clean, undeniable hit. Vral stepped back, his mind racing. He had not even felt the approach of that touch. It was not like the slow, predictable movements of prey he had hunted before. It was sharp and precise, like a blade cutting through thought itself. The announcer's voice wavered as the arena's combat sensors processed the exchange. Numbers appeared on the giant screens above the arena. Alien eyes widened in disbelief. The human reaction time flashed in bright red symbols for all to see. 0.12 seconds. The crowd erupted into chaos. Some shouted that it was a trick. Others whispered that perhaps the humans had been hiding their true nature all along. A few silent watchers in the higher boxes leaned forward, their expressions unreadable, their eyes calculating. Vral raised a hand to silence the noise, his breath steady, but his pride burning. He told himself that the number meant nothing. Reaction time alone could not win a duel. He still held the strength, the reach, the mastery of 1,000 battles. This human was merely lucky. Luck could be crushed. He crouched low again, his muscles coiling, his mind stripping away all thought but the path of the next strike. This time he would not aim for a simple hit. He would aim for the kind of blow that left nothing standing, nothing breathing, nothing to tell the tale. He would unleash the lightning, form the deadliest sequence of his people, a strike so fast it blurred the line between movement and teleportation. The human watched him with the same calm eyes as before, as if he could see through the coiled tension, see through the fury building in every fiber of the alien's being. The air between them seemed to tighten, as if even the wind held its breath. The crowd hushed, sensing that something rare was about to happen, something dangerous enough to silence their jeers. The gong dropped again with a deep rolling sound. Vral vanished into motion, the world around him reduced to a tunnel of speed and purpose. His strikes came in a pattern that no creature had ever survived. High, low, sweep, twist, high, break, slash. It was a blur so fast that even the arena's enhanced cameras could only catch fragments. He felt the air shift with each strike, certain that the human had nowhere left to move, nowhere left to hide. Yet with each flash of motion, Rafe was simply not there. It was not that he leapt far away or stumbled out of range. It was that each strike seemed to pass through a place the human had already left before Vral's own mind had even registered the attack. The champion's breath quickened, a tiny thread of doubt curling in his chest. Then it happened again. That simple, sharp touch to the shoulder. No force, no pain, just the undeniable mark of contact. Vral froze for a fraction of a second, his pride screaming louder than the noise of the crowd. The human had landed a second hit. The arena went wild. The sound of thousands of voices crashed like a storm around them, yet inside the ring of the duel there was only the quiet pulse of two hearts and the space between them. Vral stepped back, straightening his posture, refusing to let the crowd see the weight pressing into his thoughts. The human had skill, there was no denying it, but skill could be broken, speed could be crushed, and this duel was not over. He raised both his upper arms in a gesture to the crowd, calling for silence. In a voice that carried to every corner of the arena, he declared that the duel would now be fought without limits. No rules, no restrictions, only the pure speed of predator and prey. The crowd roared its approval, sensing that something even greater was about to unfold. Rafe gave the smallest nod. He did not speak, he did not smile, he simply stood ready, as if the announcement had changed nothing at all in his mind. His stance shifted, barely perceptible to the eye, but to those who knew the language of fighters, it was the sign of someone ready to end a battle in a single heartbeat. The gong was raised once more. Vral's vision narrowed, every muscle in his body singing with the energy of the lightning duel. He told himself that this would be the strike that erased all doubt, that shattered the strange calm of the human, that returned the order of the galaxy to its rightful shape. The deep metallic tone rang out the air itself, seeming to bend under the force of their movement, as both fighters became blurs on the arena floor. The cameras failed to keep track. The crowd could only see flashes of motion like lightning in a storm. The sound of impacts cracked across the space, faster than thought, faster than breath. And then, for the briefest instant, there was nothing. No movement, no sound, just two figures frozen at opposite ends of the arena. One of them had moved first. But the question that burned in every watching mind was, which one? The silence after the clash felt heavier than the roar that had filled the arena moments before. Thousands of eyes were locked on the two figures, who now stood at opposite sides of the dueling floor, their bodies still, but their energy like a storm waiting to break. Vral's chest rose and fell with slow, controlled breaths, though the burning in his muscles told him more time had passed in those exchanges than his pride wanted to admit. The human stood exactly as before, calm, steady, unshaken, his eyes never leaving the champion. The announcer hesitated, his voice carrying a note of uncertainty as he spoke into the arena's sound system, reporting that the sensors had failed to track clear hits in the last exchange. The machines could not decide who had moved first or who had struck where. To a crowd that had lived their entire lives trusting the speed and skill of their champion, this was more than confusing. It was dangerous. Vral's mind replayed the instant over and over, yet no matter how hard he searched for the truth, he could not find the moment where he had been faster. He remembered moving before thought itself. He remembered aiming with precision that had ended every battle before. Yet the human had been gone before the strike arrived. It was not possible. And yet it had happened. From the upper balconies, whispers spread among the highborn and the elite warriors of the city. If the human could match Vral's speed, then perhaps there was something the galaxy had never been told about Earth and its people. Perhaps humans were not simply clever prey. Perhaps they were predators hiding in plain sight. Vral raised one arm to silence the crowd. His voice was steady, but the edge in his tone was sharp enough to cut. He declared that the warm-up was over. If the human wanted to prove himself, then it would be in the true lightning duel. Not the half-speed game the crowd had just seen, but the full measure of their skill. A fight with no limits, no hesitation, no rules. Gasps rolled through the stands. The lightning duel was a challenge few dared to accept, for it was not simply a contest of speed, but of survival. When both fighters moved at their maximum potential, mistakes became lethal and mercy became impossible. The alien crowd turned their eyes toward the human, expecting fear, perhaps even a refusal. But Rafe simply gave the smallest of nods, his expression unchanged. The announcer's voice rose with excitement, calling for the arena to prepare for the full duel. The floor beneath them shifted into the standard lightning configuration. Metallic plates moved aside, revealing a surface with no frictional edge, a surface that demanded balance and control even in the smallest step. Energy arcs danced across the boundaries of the ring, warning any fighter who came too close to the edge that retreat was not an option. Vral stretched his forearms, his claws flexing with anticipation. He let the rhythm of the crowd's chant fuel him, the old chant of the Zelthari that had carried their champions to victory for generations. He told himself that this was where the human's luck would run out. No alien, no machine, no creature had ever matched him in the lightning duel and lived. Rafe simply stood, waiting, his breathing slow, his stance loose, but precise like a coiled thread. There was no chant for him, no crowd of his own, only silence. Yet in that silence, there was something sharper than any noise, a presence that unsettled even those watching from the shadows of the high seats. The gong was lowered again, its polished metal gleaming under the arena lights. Every being in the stands leaned forward, unable to look away. The moment the deep note rang through the air, both fighters moved. But to the untrained eye there was nothing to see. Only the faint distortion of air and the sudden clash of sound as strikes landed and missed in fractions of a second. Vral moved with the fluidity of lightning itself, his forearms a storm of claws and blades. Every angle, every feint designed to trap his opponent in an inescapable path. Yet every time his strikes should have found a human, they found nothing but the space he had just left. Rafe's movements were minimal, each step, each shift, so small that it seemed impossible for them to carry him out of danger, yet they did every single time. The alien crowd began to murmur, some voices rising with all others with anger. Vral could hear none of it. His mind was locked on the human before him, his pride refusing to accept what his senses told him. He pushed faster, his limbs blurring into invisibility. He twisted, spun, leapt, his attacks overlapping, so that there was no room for escape. Still the human remained untouched. And then Rafe moved to strike. It was a movement so quick and clean that it broke through the chaos, like a knife through silk. He did not hit with force, only precision. A sharp tap to Vral's side, another to his lower arm. Each touch was placed on a nerve point that slowed the champion's reaction by the smallest fraction. To the crowd it looked almost meaningless. To Vral it was the cold realization that his body was beginning to betray him. The champion roared, driving forward with a surge of speed that bordered on reckless. He would break through the human's guard no matter the cost. The ring became a storm of motion, energy arcs sparking as both fighters danced dangerously close to the edge. For a heartbeat it seemed Vral had the angle he needed, his upper left arm slicing toward the human's neck in a final decisive blow. But the strike met empty air. Rafe had already moved. In that same instant he appeared behind the champion, his hand hovering just short of the back of Vral's neck. He could have struck. Instead he stepped away, the ghost of a smile in his eyes, as if inviting the champion to continue. The crowd's noise swelled into something chaotic, a mix of disbelief and exhilaration. In the high balconies the elite warriors of other species exchanged looks. This duel was no longer just about pride or sport. It was becoming something else. A question of what humans truly were. Vral straightened, his breathing heavy, now the weight of the duel pressing into his limbs. He stared at the human, his mind racing through every technique, every trick he had ever learned. He would not allow this match to end in humiliation. He would find a way to break this strange, impossible speed and claim victory before the eyes of his people. The announcer's voice cut through the chaos, declaring that the duel would continue until one fighter could no longer stand. No surrender, no draws, only the final moment of truth. The crowd roared its approval. The air was thick with the pulse of energy and the scent of burning ozone from the arcs along the edge. Every eye was locked on the two figures in the ring. Vral ready to unleash every last ounce of his power. Rafe standing as if the duel had not yet begun. The gong was lifted again, its surface trembling as the mechanisms held it aloft. This would be the round that decided everything. The moment the metal struck the base, the arena would explode with motion faster and deadlier than anything the galaxy had ever seen. And as the final second ticked down, and the tension wound tight enough to break the air itself. Both fighters locked eyes and prepared for the strike that would decide whether the champion's name would echo through history, or whether the galaxy would remember the day a human took him down instantly. The gong fell, and the instant it struck the base, the air inside the arena changed. A shock of movement tore across the dueling floor, so sudden and so violent that the crowd's vision blurred. Vral and Rafe were gone, not in the sense of stepping aside or darting away, but gone from sight, entirely swallowed by speed beyond the reach of even the arena's enhanced optics. The only sign of their presence came in flashes of sound, sharp cracks that burst like thunderclaps in the confined space. Metal rang out under impacts too fast to follow. Air hissed and snapped as it was torn apart by the force of their movement. Energy arcs along the edges of the arena flared in quick bursts as the fighters skimmed dangerously close to the boundaries of the lightning floor. In the stands, the audience strained to track the duel. Some leaned forward, gripping the rails until their knuckles turned pale. Others closed their eyes, trying to hear what their eyes could not see. Each crack of contact told a story of attack and counterattack, but no one could tell who was on the edge of victory and who was being driven back. Somewhere in that blur, Vral moved with every ounce of speed his body could produce. His forearms struck in overlapping arcs, each designed to cut off the human's escape. Every motion was fueled by the humiliation he had already suffered. He could feel the blood rushing hot through his veins, the strain in his muscles, the sharp ache in his lungs. This was the speed that had made him champion of the Zelthari. This was the speed that no one could match. And yet, every strike meant nothing but empty air or the faint brush of movement just out of reach. The human was not simply avoiding him, he was shaping the fight, controlling the rhythm, without ever landing a decisive blow. It was like chasing a shadow that knew every step before you took it. Rafe's movements were so economical they almost seemed lazy. A slight shift of weight, here a turn of the shoulders, there each one happening in perfect harmony with the champion's attacks. He read the fight not as a sequence of moments, but as a single flowing pattern, and he moved within that pattern like water flowing around stone. The crowd began to murmur in a low rolling wave of disbelief. These were not the wild dodges of prey trying to survive. This was something colder, something more dangerous. It was the behavior of a predator waiting for the exact moment to strike. Vral's frustration burned hotter with each exchange. He changed his approach, abandoning the patterns that had served him in every match before. Now his strikes came at chaotic angles, from high above, from the ground, from his sides, in bursts designed to overwhelm any reaction time. His speed pushed the limits of his own body, so far that sharp flashes of pain began to ripple through his limbs, but he ignored them. The crowd gasped as one when a sudden arc of motion brought the champion's claws within a breath of the human's throat. But at the very last instant, Rafe twisted just enough for the strike to pass. The human's counter came so quickly it seemed to appear without origin. A flat open hand tapped the center of Vral's chest, right over the plate of his hard armor. The touch carried no force, yet the meaning was impossible to miss. It was the mark of someone who could have ended the fight if he had chosen to. The sound in the arena shifted. It was no longer the full-throated cheer of certain victory for the champion. It was a sound edged with doubt, with fear, with the unsettling realization that the human might be in control of the duel after all. From the high balconies, the elite warriors of other species exchanged glances. They could see what the rest of the crowd could not. They recognized the precision in the human's timing, the way his movements cost him nothing, while forcing Vral to burn energy with every attempt. If this continued, the champion would be exhausted long before the human. Vral felt it too. The burn in his arms, the tightness in his chest, the tiny delay between thought and movement that had never been there before. He roared, driving himself harder, faster than ever before. The world narrowed to a tunnel, with only the human at the end of it and the space between them closing. The duel became a storm. No single fighter visible for more than the blink of an eye. The arena floor vibrated under the constant impact of their steps. Energy arcs along the boundary blazed brighter and brighter as both came within a hair of being thrown out of the ring. Then, without warning, the human stopped moving. It was so sudden, so absolute, that Vral almost stumbled as his strike passed through the space where Rafe had been. For a fraction of a second the champion's mind screamed at the impossible stillness. Then he realized the truth. The human was not still at all. He had simply shifted into a stance so small and so perfectly balanced that the eye read it as stillness, while every muscle was ready to explode into action. The crowd saw it too, though they did not understand it. The murmur rose again, people leaning forward, as if they knew something important was about to happen. Vral lunged for what he told himself would be the final blow. Every muscle, every tendon, every part of his being moved in perfect unison toward the kill. Yet in the space between his thought and the landing of his strike, the human vanished from his path. It was not speed alone, it was timing so exact it seemed to bend reality. When Rafe reappeared, he was behind the champion. His hand rested an inch from the base of Vral's neck in the exact spot that would end the duel in a single precise strike. But once again he did not finish it. Instead, he let the moment stretch for all to see before stepping back. The crowd erupted into shouts and cries, their disbelief turning into a chaotic roar. Some screamed for the champion to finish the human. Others shouted that the duel was already over in spirit, if not in rule. In the high balconies, the quiet watchers exchanged words in low tones, their attention fixed on the human's still calm face. Vral turned slowly, his breathing loud in his ears. The humiliation was worse now than any defeat he could imagine, because he had not yet lost, and yet the crowd was no longer certain of his victory. He knew the human was holding back, and that knowledge burned hotter than any wound. The announcer's voice rang out, declaring that the lightning duel would continue. There would be no end until one fighter could not rise again. The crowd roared in answer, their voices shaking the air above the arena. Rafe simply reset his stance, his eyes never leaving Vral's. It was the look of someone who had already seen the end of this duel and was simply waiting for the moment to arrive. The gong was raised again, and the air grew tight and heavy. Every being in the stands knew the next exchange could be the one that ended the legend of Vral or cemented it forever. In that suspended moment between the rise of the gong and its fall, the champion locked his mind on the human and promised himself that whatever came next would not be hesitation, would not be mercy, would not be defeat. The gong fell again, and the instant the deep metallic tone rolled across the arena, the human moved first. It was not a dodge, and it was not the subtle step-backs the crowd had seen before. This time Rafe surged forward with a suddenness that turned the breath of every watcher into silence. For the first time since the duel began, the champion found himself on the defensive. Vral reacted on instinct, his arms sweeping in wide arcs to block the incoming attack. Yet the human's path cut through those arcs with the precision of a blade sliding between armor plates. Each movement was direct and purposeful, no wasted energy, no hesitation. Rafe struck at nerve points along Vral's limbs, each touch not powerful enough to break bone, but perfectly placed to slow the champion's movements by fractions of a second. To most eyes it looked like the human was simply tapping the alien without harm. To the trained eye it was the dismantling of speed itself, piece by piece. Every strike forced Vral to adjust, forced him to recover balance, forced his muscles to strain just a little harder. The crowd could see the change now. The alien champion, who had always pressed forward, was being pushed back step by step. Vral's breathing quickened as he tried to match the pace. He swung low to force the human into a leap. But Rafe stepped aside at the last instant, letting the swing carry Vral's weight too far. A quick strike to the side of the knee, followed by a palm to the shoulder, sent a sharp pulse through the alien's nervous system. It was not pain that rattled him, but the sudden realization that his body was beginning to slow. Rafe's eyes were calm and cold as he pressed the attack. Every move seemed to predict the next defensive action before Vral could even think of it. The alien's forearms became a wall of desperate defense instead of an unbreakable offense. The crowd roared at the shift, their disbelief mixing with the thrill of seeing the impossible unfold before them. From the high balconies, the quiet watchers leaned forward. They recognized the style now. It was not alien, and it was not a civilian combat method. It was military. Old-world military refined through countless close-quarter battles. They began to understand that the human speed was not simply a natural gift. It was forged in training where hesitation meant death, and every motion had to matter. Vral tried to break away to create distance, but Rafe stayed on him like a shadow. A sharp turn around the champion's side brought him into a perfect angle for a strike. His palm landed just below the ribs, pressing into a point that disrupted the alien's breath. Vral staggered for the first time in the match, his footing slipping for a heartbeat. Gasps rolled through the stands. The champion's pride flared into rage. He launched himself upward, using the full spring of his legs to rain down a crushing double strike from above. But Rafe was already moving, stepping just far enough that the blow slammed into the arena floor with a ringing crack. Before Vral could recover, Rafe's foot hooked around his ankle, sweeping it out from under him. The alien's body hit the ground with a thud that echoed in the tense air. The crowd froze as the human stepped in close. One knee pressed lightly against the champion's chest, just enough to hold him in place. Rafe leaned forward and spoke something only Vral could hear, his words quiet enough to be lost under the noise of the arena. Whatever he said made the alien's eyes widen for a moment before narrowing into a glare. The meaning was clear even without hearing the words. It was a challenge and a warning all in one. Rafe stepped back, allowing Vral to rise. There was no mockery in his expression, only that same unshakable calm. The crowd erupted into a storm of voices, some screaming for the human to finish it, others demanding the champion reclaim his honor. In the high balconies, a few of the silent watchers now watched Rafe with something close to respect. Vral pushed himself up, the weight of the duel now heavy in his limbs. His breaths came faster, and his shoulders carried the strain of constant defense. But his pride refused to let him end it here. He roared and rushed forward again, claws slicing through the air in a desperate flurry. The human met him head on, matching strike for strike with the same precise timing that had dismantled his offense moments ago. The duel became a rhythm of attack and counterattack. Vral's strength against Rafe's timing. The floor shuddered with each impact, energy arcs flaring around them as the edges of the arena caught the stray force of their movements. The crowd could no longer tell who held the advantage. Each exchange left them more breathless than the last. But Rafe's control never wavered. Every strike he landed was measured. Every dodge was exact. He was not rushing to end the duel. He was wearing the champion down piece by piece. The watchers who understood combat knew the truth now. The human was not simply fast enough to match Vral. He was controlling the pace of the fight entirely. Vral's arms slowed by imperceptible degrees, each movement costing more energy than it should. His strikes began to leave openings he would never have allowed in the early moments. And Rafe was there for each one, stepping through the smallest gaps with precision, strikes to the limbs, to the ribs, to the chest. None of them were killing blows. All of them were calculated to bring the duel closer to its inevitable end. The crowd's energy shifted again. The cheers for the champion grew quieter, while the voices shouting for the human grew louder. Some still clung to the belief that Vral could turn it around. Others could already see the writing on the wall. The announcer's voice rose over the chaos, declaring the match still in progress, but the tension in his tone told the truth. This was no longer the same duel that had begun with certainty of the champion's victory. This was something else, something that would be remembered. Vral's breath came in heavy bursts, now his vision narrowing as fatigue began to creep into his thoughts. Yet he refused to fall. His next strike came from the left at an angle meant to draw the human into a trap. Rafe stepped into it instead of away, letting the alien believe the trap had worked. At the last moment he pivoted inside the swing, placing his palm against Vral's chest and shoving just enough to send him stumbling back toward the edge of the arena. Gasps erupted as the champion's foot scraped against the barrier's glow. One more step and he would be out, but he twisted and caught his balance, his forearms spread wide for stability. He glared at the human, his pride burning hotter than his fatigue. Rafe stood at the center of the arena, his breathing steady, his gaze unwavering. It was the stance of a man who knew exactly how the next exchange would end. And as the gong was raised once more, the crowd felt the weight of inevitability. The next moment would decide if the champion's pride could survive or if the human's control would break it completely. The gong rose high above the arena, casting its silver reflection across the dueling floor, and for a breath the entire crowd held still, as if the sound to come would decide more than a winner. Vral's body trembled with exhaustion, yet inside his mind the fire of defiance burned hotter than it ever had before. He would not let this human walk away with victory. Not here, not in front of his people, not with the eyes of the galaxy watching. Rafe stood in the center of the floor as unmoving as stone, yet every line of his posture spoke of readiness. His breathing was slow and deep, his gaze locked on the champion, with the quiet focus of a man who had already measured the fight and found its end. To the crowd, it was the stare of someone who feared nothing. To Vral, it was a provocation. The gong fell, its deep metallic tone vibrating through the air and into the bones of every watcher. Vral exploded forward with the last of his strength, his four arms striking in a storm, so fast the light around them seemed to bend. Every strike was aimed to end the duel in a single movement. He pushed his body past the red line of pain, beyond the limits of muscle and bone, beyond the careful control that had made him champion. This was desperation forged into speed. Rafe moved at the same moment, but not in a rush. His steps were precise, his motions small and controlled. It was as though he had been waiting for this exact sequence of attacks. Each strike that should have cut him down passed within a hair's width. Each counter was measured for maximum effect, without wasting energy. The crowd roared, unable to track the details, but sensing the magnitude of the exchange. The floor shook with the impacts, the sound of claws against reinforced plating echoing like drumbeats in the storm. Energy arcs flared at the edges, bathing the fighters in flashes of white and blue light. Vral drove in close, twisting his lower right arm into a hooking strike, meant to catch the human in the ribs, while his upper arms came down like hammers. But the human stepped into the hook instead of away, his shoulder slipping past the swing as his foot anchored on the plate. In the same motion, his hand shot upward, striking the inside of Vral's upper arm at a precise nerve cluster. The champion's grip faltered for the briefest instant, but that instant was enough. Rafe pivoted his weight, using the alien's own momentum to guide him forward into the path of a second strike. It was not forceful, it was not brutal. It was simply placed with the accuracy of a blade, finding the narrowest gap in armor. The palm landed at the base of Vral's sternum, and the shock of it sent a ripple through his body. His breath caught, his steps faltered, and his speed broke for the first time in the match. The human pressed forward with relentless precision. Every step cut off the champion's retreat. Every strike found a joint or a nerve or a point where balance shifted just enough to force Vral into recovery. It was like watching a master craftsman dismantle a weapon piece by piece until nothing sharp remained. The alien's pride drove him to swing again, even as his arms grew heavier than stone. Each movement now cost him more than it returned. Rafe's expression never changed, his eyes locked on the center of the champion's form, reading the smallest motions and turning them into openings. The noise of the crowd faded into a low background hum as the duel narrowed to the rhythm of breath and movement. Vral knew he was losing, and yet the thought of surrender burned hotter than the pain in his limbs. He tried one final feint, twisting to the left, before snapping back with a high strike from his right upper arm. But the human was already there, waiting, his body angled to slip inside the arc and meet the champion in the space before the strike reached full power. In that moment, Rafe's hand came up in a clean, straight line, landing against the side of Vral's neck. There was no forceful shove, no violent impact, only the perfect placement of energy and timing. The champion's knees buckled, his body's speed shutting down like a machine denied power. He collapsed to one knee, the floor ringing under the weight. The crowd gasped in unison, their disbelief washing over the arena like a wave. Some cried out for Vral to rise, others were silent, unable to process what they had seen. In the high balconies, the silent watchers now stood, their eyes fixed on the human, as if trying to memorize every detail. Rafe stepped back, giving the champion space to rise. For a moment it seemed Vral might try. His arms twitched, his chest heaved, his black eyes locked on the human's calm face. But his body betrayed him, and he remained kneeling. The announcer's voice broke the tension, declaring that the duel was over. The human had achieved victory. The sound rolled across the arena, but to Rafe it was only background noise. He had not fought for the roar of the crowd. He had fought to deliver a message. Vral's breathing slowed as the medics approached, but he lifted a hand to wave them away. His pride was wounded but not broken. He looked up at the human, and there was no hatred in his gaze now. Only a kind of wary respect mixed with the deep sting of defeat. The crowd erupted again, this time not with the unified chant of the champion's name, but with a roar that carried the humans' victory into every corner of the arena. Some shouted and all others in anger, but all knew they had witnessed something that would be remembered in every retelling of lightning duels from this day forward. Rafe gave a slight nod toward Vral, then turned and began walking toward the gate that would take him from the floor. He did not raise his arms in triumph. He did not acknowledge the crowd. His steps were steady and quiet, as if the duel had been only another task completed. Behind him, Vral remained on one knee, his mind replaying every moment, every shift, every touch. He knew now that the human speed was not the raw reaction time of a gifted fighter. It was something learned, something trained in places and under conditions the Zelthari had never imagined. And for the first time since taking the champion's mantle, he wondered if there were other humans out there with the same training, the same patience, the same unshakable will. The gate closed behind Rafe, and the noise of the arena dulled into a muffled roar. The medics moved in to help the champion, but he brushed them off, standing on his own. His body ached, his pride burned, but his mind was already turning. This was not the end of his story, and it was not the last time he would face the human. And somewhere in the crowd, unseen by most, a figure in a dark cloak turned and left the arena. Their eyes had not been on the champion. They had been on the human from the moment he stepped into the light. And as they disappeared into the winding streets of the alien city, they carried with them a message meant for powers far beyond this world. The arena had emptied hours ago, yet the echoes of the crowd still seemed to linger in the corridors beneath the dueling floor. Outside, the streets of the alien city pulsed with the aftershocks of the day's spectacle, every tavern and gathering place alive with arguments about the human who had taken down the champion. Some called it luck, some swore it was trickery, and a few whispered in low voices that it was only the beginning of something far greater. In a private chamber, high above the dueling floor, Rafe sat at a long obsidian table, his posture straight, his hands resting loosely before him. The walls around him shimmered with a faint hum from the privacy fields, keeping all sound contained inside. Across the table sat an elder of the Zelthari, his silver-scaled skin catching the soft light, his 4 eyes focused with quiet intensity on the man who had just shaken the foundations of their sport, and perhaps their pride. The elder spoke slowly, each word deliberate, as if weighing the risk of asking too much. He told Rafe that he recognized the movements, the precision, the way he seemed to know the strike before it was made. It was not alien, and it was not the untrained reflexes of chance. It was something older, something practiced in conditions where survival was counted in the smallest fractions of time. Rafe's eyes did not change. He asked the elder how much he knew of human history. The alien admitted that most of what they had heard painted humans as clever, but fragile, quick-witted, but slow in body. Rafe's expression shifted the smallest amount, almost like a shadow passing over stone. He said that such stories had been useful to his people for a very long time. The elder leaned forward, his voice dropping even though the privacy field was strong. He asked if Rafe's speed was natural. Rafe shook his head once. He said it was earned through a program so secret that most of his own kind did not even know it existed. A program designed for soldiers who would fight in environments where one blink could mean death. Training under conditions where opponents moved faster than sight, and where the only way to live was to move before thought finished forming. The elder's 4 eyes narrowed at the implication. He asked why such a warrior would reveal himself now, after remaining hidden for so long. Rafe's answer was quiet, because someone needed to be reminded that humans were not prey. In the streets below, word of the duel was spreading far beyond the city. Data streams carried it across the system, then across the sector. On worlds where humans were underestimated, it became a story told in hushed awe. On worlds where humans were feared, it became a warning whispered in guarded meetings. In the dueling arena, Vral remained in the medical ward, though he had refused full treatment. The champion's pride had been bruised deeper than any injury to his body. He lay on the examination bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the fight. At first, he had wanted to believe the human's victory was a fluke, a chance alignment of luck and misstep. But the more he replayed it, the more he saw the control, the purpose behind every movement. It had not been a duel of equals. It had been a demonstration. One of the medics stepped into the room with a small sealed case. Inside was a recording unit. Vral had it brought to him and activated the playback. The footage was from an angle no arena camera had access to. It showed the duel from above in slow motion. And there it was. The human not moving faster than the champion, but moving sooner. Reading each shift of weight, each twitch of muscle before the strike, was fully formed. It was not only speed. It was prediction born of training, and perhaps something even more unsettling. Patience. Vral sat up and closed the recording unit. He knew now that his loss was not the end. It was a challenge he intended to answer. But deep inside, a part of him also wanted to learn. Far from the arena, in a darkened room, lit only by the pale glow of data screens, a cloaked figure replayed the duel in silence. Every movement of the human was catalogued, analyzed, broken into frames and patterns. The figure sent a single encrypted message into the network, its path bouncing across a dozen worlds before vanishing into the void. The message was short. They are ready. Back in the private chamber, the elder asked Rafe one final question. He wanted to know if there were others like him. Rafe's answer was a faint smile. He said that on Earth speed was only one of many skills worth mastering, and that there were humans who could match his speed, humans who could fight without being seen, humans who could break a ship's systems with a glance at its schematics. He said that most of the galaxy would never meet them unless they had to. And if that day came, it would not be for sport. The elder leaned back in his seat, his mind turning over the possibilities. He understood now why the human had fought without killing, without humiliating the champion more than necessary. It was not to prove personal superiority. It was to plant a seed, one that would grow into either respect or fear. Outside, the chamber, night had fallen over the alien city. The crystalline towers glowed with their own light, casting pale reflections on the streets below. Rafe walked alone through a service exit, his footsteps silent against the polished stone. He carried no trophy and sought no celebration. The duel had been only a message, and those who needed to hear it already had. In the medical ward, Vral rose from his bed, ignoring the protests of the medics. He stepped to the window overlooking the city lights. Somewhere out there, the human was walking away, without looking back. Vral's pride told him to call for a rematch, but a different voice, deeper and older, urged him to wait, to prepare, to understand. In the distant void beyond the system, ships moved quietly, their transponders dark. They carried no flags and flew under no known registry. On their bridges were men and women whose eyes moved with the same sharpness as Rafe's. They spoke little and trained constantly. Somewhere in their orders was the same quiet purpose, to move when the time came and not before. And as the alien city settled into its restless sleep, the story of the duel spread further. By morning, it would be in every major channel across the sector. By the end of the week, it would reach worlds that had never seen a human. And by then, the message would be clear. Humans might be slow to show their teeth, but when they did, no one moved faster,